Every time you touch my hand, see you no more. That was us that I found someone.
David Ruffin was one of those unforgettable voices in American soul music. You might know him best as the dynamic lead singer of The Temptations during their Classic 5 era. The guy had a voice that could make you feel everything, every high and low of love. He had this way of pouring raw emotion into each lyric that just hit home for anyone listening. It's no wonder he created such a strong connection with so many fans. But like a lot of stars, Ruffin's story wasn't all smooth sailing. At the height of his fame, he faced some serious battles with substance abuse, and that struggle left a gap in the music world that his fans felt deeply. Sadly, he passed away at just 50 years old in Detroit, leaving behind a legacy tainted by the effects of addiction.
It was 21 years ago that David Ruffin died in this hospital.
And even now, there are still whispers about the untold parts of Ruffin's life, especially after My Girl came out in November 1964. That song didn't just become The Temptations' first big hit in 1965. It launched Ruffin into the spotlight as their frontman, but as the group moved into 1967, things started to get tough. Ruffin's addiction was getting worse, leading to missed rehearsals and performances, and that definitely created some tension in the group. There was even that one time when Ruffin, in true superstar fashion, decided to ditch the group ride. Instead, he and his girlfriend, Tammy Terrell, rolled up in their own custom limousine, complete with his signature black-rimmed glasses painted on the door. It was a bold move that showed off his star power, but it also hinted at the personal battles he was fighting behind the scenes. When the Supremes changed their name to Diana Ross and the Supremes in early 1967, David Ruffin got a bit of an itch. He thought, hey, if Diana Ross can be the star of her group, why can't I?
And when you are a group, you have to move and think as one unit. You cannot have 5 guys going 5 different directions.
So Ruffin pitched the idea of renaming The Temptations to David Ruffin and the Temptations. And as you might guess, that didn't go over too well, especially with Otis Williams, who was the group's unofficial leader.
Things within the group, was things always a group decision? Was there a leader?
Well, we all made decisions we talked about it and then we carried it out on some things.
Were you kind of the godfather of the group? You were the one, because you were the founder. I mean, were you the one that...
Okay, my question is to Otis. Why was David Ruffin fired from the Temptations?
Well, you see, when we first started out, we made a vow that we would not change.
But hold your horses. That was just the tip of the iceberg. Ruffin wasn't just after the name change. He started poking around the group's finances, demanding to know exactly where all the money was going. This, of course, didn't win him any fans, especially with Motown's big boss Berry Gordy. Things were getting tense, and it all came to a head in June 1968 when Ruffin decided to skip a scheduled Temptations concert in Cleveland. Why? To catch a show by his new girlfriend, Barbara Gail Martin. That was the last straw. The group finally decided to cut ties with Ruffin on June 27th. Then entered Dennis Edwards. He was a former member of the Contours and already knew Ruffin and the guys. Ruffin even gave him a nod and said, "Go ahead, take my spot." But you know Ruffin wasn't one to just disappear quietly. Nope, he started showing up unannounced at Temptations concerts, especially during Edwards' early days with the group. Whenever they performed one of Ruffin's old hits like My Girl or Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Ruffin would casually stroll onto the stage, snatch the mic from Edwards, and start singing his heart out. Fans were thrilled, but the group, not so much. At first, the Temptations actually considered bringing Ruffin back. I mean, the crowd loved him. But then, he showed up late for what was supposed to be his grand return performance in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and that was it. They decided to stick with Edwards. Now, you'd think this would be the end of the drama, but oh no, there's more. By 1967, Ruffin was finally trying to tackle his demons, seeking help for his addiction for the first time. But trouble seemed to follow him like a shadow. In 1978, he got himself arrested in Memphis on his birthday, no less, for refusing to leave a party and allegedly some police officers and their families. Ruffin denied making any and was let go without bail. And wait, it doesn't stop there. In 1982, Ruffin got slapped with a $5,000 fine and 6 months in a low-security prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, for failing to pay over $310,000 in taxes from 1975 to 1977. He served 4 months and got out early for good behavior. Silver linings, right? Fast forward to 1986, Ruffin pleaded no contest to receiving and concealing a stolen Colt .32 caliber handgun. He got off with a $50 fine and $100 in court costs. But then, in 1987, he found himself in hot water again. Arrested during a raid in Detroit, they charged him with possession with intent to distribute less than 20 grams. He was found not guilty of possession but was convicted of using the and that, my friend, is just a glimpse of David Ruffin's wild ride. A life filled with fame, drama, and battles that were as intense as his unforgettable voice. So here's how things went down. In 1989, Ruffin got hit with 2 years of probation and 50 days of community service because he kept violating his probation. And since that wasn't enough, the court ordered him into rehab. He managed to complete a 28-day treatment program at the Aretha Casriel Institute in New York, which was a big step in the right direction. But despite his attempts to turn things around, and even after wrapping up a successful month-long tour of England with his fellow musicians Kendrick and Edwards, things took a tragic turn. On June 1st, 1991, David Ruffin passed away from what was ruled an accidental overdose of crack. Here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. Reports say Ruffin collapsed at a crack house in West Philadelphia. His friend Donald Brown was with him at the time and rushed him to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. The medical team worked on him for nearly an hour, but sadly, at 3:55 a.m., Ruffin was declared dead. The official cause? An adverse reaction, specifically. But hold on, that's not the end of the story. According to the Associated Press, Ruffin and a man named William Knoll had allegedly shared 10 vials of crack in the hours leading up to his death at Knowles' West Philadelphia place. The authorities ruled it an accidental overdose, but Ruffin's family and friends weren't buying it. They suspected foul play, especially since a money belt he had been wearing, reportedly containing $40,000, went missing. However, Ruffin's then-girlfriend, Diane Showers, wasn't exactly shocked when she heard the news of his passing. She said, when David had a lot of money, he would be able to do things that he wanted to do, hinting at the challenges he'd faced. David Ruffin's funeral was held at New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit, and it was quite the send-off. The surviving members of the Temptations paid tribute by performing My Girl, while music legends Stevie Wonder and Aretha Franklin also sang in his honor. Michael Jackson even offered to cover the funeral costs, though he didn't attend the service himself. The church was filled with beautiful floral arrangements sent by big names like Rod Stewart, Daryl Hall, John Oates, Diana Ross, the Spinners, and Martha Reeves, and the Vandellas. Ruffin was laid to rest in Section 3 of Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit. And while it's easy to focus on the tragic circumstances surrounding his death, let's not forget that David Ruffin was so much more than his struggles with addiction. Born on January 18, 1941, as Davis Eli Ruffin in the tiny, unincorporated community of Wynot, Mississippi, yes, that's a real place, just 15 miles from Meridian, he was the third son of Elias Ely Ruffin, a Baptist minister, and Ophelia Ruffin. He grew up with his siblings Quincy B. Ruffin, Rita Mae Ruffin, and Jimmy Lee Ruffin, along with a sister Rosine, who sadly passed away in infancy. Both of Ruffin's parents were from Mississippi. His father Eli worked as a truck driver for various lumber mills, while his mother Ophelia managed work at home. Ruffin's childhood wasn't exactly a walk in the park. His dad, known for his strict and sometimes harsh discipline, ran a tight ship. Tragically, Ruffin's mother passed away from childbirth complications just 10 months after he was born in 1941. The family dynamic changed again in 1942 when his father remarried Earlene, a schoolteacher. Growing up, Ruffin and his siblings, older brothers Quincy and Jimmy, and sister Riata Mae, didn't have a typical childhood. They hit the road as part of a family gospel group led by their dad and stepmom, and we're not talking small-time gigs here. They opened for legends like Mahalia Jackson and the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi. Ruffin's voice didn't go unnoticed. He was singing his heart out in church choirs and talent shows wherever he could, like at Mount Salem Methodist Church. By the age of 14, Ruffin decided it was time to chase his own dreams. So in 1955, under the watchful eye of Minister Eddie Bush, he left home and headed to Memphis, Tennessee, with hopes of becoming a minister himself. But life had other plans. By the time he was 15, he ended up in Hot Springs, Arkansas, with jazz musician Phineas Newborn Sr. Now going by the name Little David Bush, Ruffin kept busy, participating in talent shows, working with horses at a jockey club, and even joining the Dixie Nightingales. Ruffin's musical journey took him to some interesting places. For a short time, he even sang with the Soul Stirrers after Johnny Taylor left the group. But with idols like Sam Cooke and Jackie Wilson blazing the trail towards secular music, Ruffin was inspired to follow a similar path. By the time he was 16, he had his sights set on new horizons. Thanks to Eddie Bush and his wife Dorothy Helen, Ruffin made the move to Detroit, Michigan, where his brother Jimmy was already diving into the music scene while juggling a job at the Ford Motor Company. Once he settled in Detroit with the bushes, Ruffin wasted no time getting started on his own music career. He recorded his first released tracks, You and I, and Believe Me, at Vega Records, going by the name Little David Bush, using his guardian's last name. Reflecting on those early days, Ruffin remembered experimenting with different styles, influenced by the smooth pop and R&B sounds that were all the rage back then. Fast forward to 1957, and Ruffin crossed paths with Berry Gordy Jr., who was just an aspiring songwriter at the time, dreaming of starting his own label. During this period, Ruffin even lived with Gordy's father, who worked as a contractor.
I met Berry in '57, and I came from Hot Spring, Arkansas. I just finished a group called the Dixie Nightingales.
Ruffin got his hands dirty too, helping out with construction on the building that would eventually become Hitsville, USA, the headquarters for Gordy's Tamla Records, what we all now know as Motown Records. Meanwhile, Ruffin's brother Jimmy wasn't sitting around either. He signed with Tamla's Miracle Records label, proving that talent definitely ran in the family. Ruffin's journey through the music world was filled with fascinating collaborations and stories. For a while, he teamed up with Marvin Gaye while learning the ropes at Anna Records, a label distributed by Chess and overseen by Berry Gordy's sister Gwen Gordy Fuqua and her songwriting partner Billy Davis.
Me and Marvin used to pack records for Anna Records. My first record was on Vega Records with Tommy Smalls.
In a 1988 interview with the Detroit Free Press, Gwen Gordy Fuqua had nothing but praise for Ruffin, describing him as a true gentleman who exhibited exceptional dedication to his craft. She went on to say, "He was very much a gentleman, yes ma'am and no ma'am. But the thing that really impressed me about David was that he was one of the only artists I've seen who rehearsed like he was on stage. Now that's commitment." During this time, Ruffin and Marvin Gaye were both involved in packing records for Anna Records. Talk about paying your dues. David also wore many hats as he pursued his dreams, serving as both vocalist and drummer for the Voice Masters, a doo-wop style group. He began his recording career at Anna Records, where he contributed to the song I'm in Love One of These Days with the Voice Masters. This group featured some notable members like Lamont Dozier, who would later become a producer at Motown, and others like Ty Hunter, C.P. Spencer, Hank Dixon, and Walter Gaines, who founded both the Voice Masters and the Originals. Interestingly, Melvin Franklin, another Future Temptations member and someone David would later identify as his cousin, also spent time with the Voice Masters. Even though Ruffin signed with Anna Records as a solo artist, he didn't find immediate success there, but things started to change when his path crossed with the Temptations, a promising local group. David's older brother Jimmy, who was on the Motown Review tour with the Temptations, tipped him off that the group needed a tenor vocalist. David expressed his interest, and soon he was in discussions with Otis Williams, who was also based in Detroit. By January 1964, David officially became a member of the Temptations, filling the spot left by founding member Elbridge Al Bryant. David's first recording session with the Temptations took place on January 9, 1964. Both he and his brother auditioned for the group, but David's compelling performance at the label's New Year's Eve party in 1963 sealed the deal. Initially, David contributed background vocals while Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams took on most of the lead singing roles. During his first year with the group, he sang a few lead parts in both live performances and studio recordings. However, these studio tracks with Ruffin in the lead were held back for over a year, as they were considered insufficient to showcase his vocal talents. Smokey Robinson, the prolific producer and co-writer of much of the Temptations material during this period, saw something special in Ruffin, calling him a sleeping giant within the group. Robinson described Ruffin's voice as mellow yet gruff, and was determined to write the perfect song that would let Ruffin shine, belting out his powerful vocals while also conveying a sweet melodic quality. This vision came to life with the creation of My Girl, recorded in November 1964 and released a month later. The song quickly climbed the charts, becoming the group's first #1 single in 1965 and their signature song. But things took a turn in October 1968 when David Ruffin took legal action against Motown Records, seeking a release from his contract and an accurate accounting of his financial dealings. Motown countersued to prevent Ruffin from leaving the label, and the case was eventually settled, with Ruffin required to fulfill his contract until its conclusion. Ruffin had a separate solo artist contract with Motown when he joined, which some believed contributed to internal tensions within the group. Transitioning to his solo career, Ruffin's first single, My Whole World Ended, The Moment You Left Me, was released in 1969. The single, initially intended for the Temptations, reached the top 10 on both the US pop and R&B charts. His solo debut album, My Whole World Ended, saw success, followed by the release of Feelin' Good. Another album titled David was recorded between 1970 and 1971 but remained shelved by Motown until its commercial release in 2004. Unfortunately, Ruffin's solo career faced a decline, partly due to his reported addiction and what many perceived as a lack of support from Motown. His last big hit, Walk Away from Love, produced by Van McCoy in 1975, reached number 9 on the pop charts and became his only solo appearance on the UK charts, where it also secured a top 10 spot. Despite his struggles, Ruffin continued to release notable recordings, including I Lost Everything I've Ever Loved, the gospel-infused I'm So Glad I Fell For You, Blood Donors Needed, and Common Man, which was sampled in Jay-Z's 2001 song Never Change. After leaving Motown in 1977, Ruffin signed with Warner Bros. Records and released the albums So Soon We Change and Gentleman Ruffin. Later, he struck a deal with RCA Records, reuniting with his former Temptations colleague Eddie Kendricks. This collaboration rekindled their friendship, with Kendricks joining Ruffin after facing challenges with the Temptations. In 1982, Ruffin and Kendricks rejoined the Temptations for the album Reunion and went on tour to promote its release. The album featured the R&B hit Standing on the Top with Rick James. However, the Reunion tour was short-lived, as Ruffin's struggles with addiction led to missed shows and substantial fines, prompting Otis Williams to dismiss Ruffin from the group for the second and final time, along with Kendricks, whose voice had been affected by heavy smoking. This dismissal occurred by Christmas 1982. In 1985, Ruffin and Kendricks formed a duo act and began touring together. That same year, they teamed up with longtime Temptations fans Hall & Oates for a performance at the reopening of the Apollo Theater in New York. The live recording of their performance became a successful album and single, and the quartet also performed a medley of Temptations hits at Live Aid on July 13, 1985. A live medley of The Way You Do the Things You Do and My Girl was released by Hall & Oates, featuring Ruffin and Kendricks in 1985, reaching various positions on the Billboard charts. After their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the Temptations in 1989, Ruffin, Kendricks, and Dennis Edwards formed a trio called Ruffin/Kendricks/Edwards, former leads of the Temptations. In 1991, they completed a successful month-long tour of England, grossing nearly $300,000. At the time of Ruffin's death, they were planning a European tour and had recently recorded the single Hurt the One You Love for Motor City Records. David Ruffin was admired by many fellow artists. His close friend and colleague, Martha Reeves of Martha and the Vandellas, once said, "Nobody could sing like David Ruffin." Marvin Gaye, his contemporary label mate, was particularly impressed with Ruffin's vocal prowess. Gaye said Ruffin's work made me remember that when a lot of women listen to music, they want to feel the power of a real man. David Ruffin was a remarkable talent who left us too soon, but he remains deeply cherished by his fans and colleagues. Thanks for watching.